Thank you for joining us today at Miniature Wargaming Labs. Today, I have in front of you the game board from Kill Team Pariah Nexus, an example of each one of the terrain pieces from Pariah Nexus. And what we're going to do in this episode is show you how I painted this terrain piece. And you should know that the colors I used for this piece are the same ones I used for the other pieces. To be fair, the door I had a little black and a little yellow there to make it stand out. But it's going to be the same 7 colors to make this little piece and all these little pieces. To start, I primed these the old Games Workshop Dark Angels Green. It's a hard can to find. If you can't find that, any primer will do to cover up the plastic, then throw some Games Workshop Wall Green. But I used Games Workshop's Moot Green, Army Painter's Goblin Green, Games Workshop's Leadbelcher, Army Painter's Shining Silver, Games Workshop's Pallid Witch Flesh, Games Workshop's Layer White Scar, and of course I slopped at one point some Games Workshop Nuln Oil Shade. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Now I prime my terrain Dark Angels Green. This is a color primer that Games Workshop doesn't make anymore. I had some left, so I used it on this model. If you don't have Dark Angels Green, you could always paint it some other color. So this is an example of Army Painter Green. Not as dark as I wanted, but I would recommend, whatever primer you use, just put a layer of Wall Flesh from Games Workshop, or P3's Gnarls Green would get that dark green that you see in that box. But so we've got our dark green model here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Games Workshop Leadbelcher, and I want to copy the box art as closely as possible. So that means these little metal bands right there. So there's one on each side, and then I'm going to get the piping up on the top. And just for fun, you can see there's also little pipes between here. So I'll get these. And there's also these little bolts up here. So I'll paint those also. So we'll go ahead, go around the model and get all the Leadbelcher on. Now that I've finished applying the Leadbelcher to all the metal piping here, what I'm going to do is take a messed up brush, get that nice and wet on the bristles, and I'm going to take some Nuln oil. And what I'm going to do is just put a liberal amount on the model. This will darken down the metal and create slight variations in the dark green. And then once we do that, we're going to let that dry a while, which is why when we paint these, we paint them in batches, just to take advantage of the drying time. Get down to this part. Just stick my finger in there. And that didn't work. Okay. What you do is just set it down there. There we go. Now let this little guy dry. Now that our Nuln oil has dried, I'm going to take some Army Painter Goblin Green, and I'm just going to put a dry brush on this. But it's only going to be the edges. So I've already squeezed some out, and I have a A little sheet of paper over here, and I'm just going to go like that. Just catching the edges. And then what I'll do is I'll spin it one way. And then I'll turn it around. And catch the other edge here. And then with this little greeblings at the bottom, just go like that. And just a little run right up that line. We're making a little glowing effect. And this is terrain, doesn't have to be super neat. We dry brush a lot of the paint out just so the paint catches the edge. Now here on the top, I'm actually going to just turn all the little raised surfaces up here the Goblin green. And I'm going to paint this little crystal in the center, the green. Alright, now I'll just go around and make sure I didn't miss any edges. So I finished dry brushing on the Goblin green. So I've got that base green where I want it. Now I'm going to take some Citadel's Moot green. And what I'm going to do with this one is this is going to be also dry brushed, but we're only going to do basically 50% of the model and up. So we'll do the same thing, but we're only going to do just the edges, the top 50% of the edges. And for the top, you're going to do the same thing. And I think almost done. So I want to be a little more sparing on this green because that gives the sense that the glow is emanating from here, spreading out to the rest. We're already getting a nice glow there. So I want that gemstone to dry before we move to the next step. Now as we wait for this green to dry, we still have the metal bits. and I'm going to highlight it with some shining silver. Just need a couple drops since we're just doing one. Alright. So get a little paint on my brush. And what we do is just ride the top edge. Just like drawing with a pencil. Just quickly go around and hit the top rounded edge of the piping. Since we're just getting it battle ready, we're just gonna put little dots of paint right there. And we'll finish along the sides here. Now it's time to move on to really define the glowiness of this element. So that's the gemstone. So we're going to start off with some Pallid witch flesh. And I'm just going to take my brush here. And so we put the green down to basically lighten up from the Dark Angel's green, so that this white would sit on top more easily. And we only need one coat for what we're going to do. And so I'm going to put some white there. I love Pallid witch flesh. It's a very good white, right up there with the Iron Rack skin. And we're at a point that if you want to stop at any time and call it done on your assembly line, feel free to. Here's what we'll do. Get a little paint there. What we'll do is we'll just run the edge like that in the side of the brush. Alright, now we're going to wait for that white to completely dry. Now that our white has dried, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back to my Moot green. I'm just going to do the gemstone in the center. Now the way the box art is, it just depicts the gemstone as a pure white. If you're happy with that, you can just go ahead and probably finish it off with some white scar, just some edge highlighting there. But what I'm going to do is I want to make it look more green and glowy in there, like there's plasma moving around. So I loaded a bunch of Moot green on my brush. I dipped that paint into my water tub there, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water until the paint loosens up. And what you can see right here is I drag the paint up and it retracts back. So I use the end of my brush. That's the viscosity I want on my paint, and then I'm just going to glop it on. So this is kind of a glaze. This is similar to what contrast paint does. And you can just see as that grabs the flat panels. And just get the right amount how I want it to dry. Alright, and we're going to let that definitely dry for a while. Now for the final step. So I've got my green glossy gem there, and I'm going to take some very bright white. This is White Scar from Games Workshop. And what I'm going to do is take my same brush here, my thin one, and I'm just going to get a little bit of paint here, and I'll just first go around the inside loop here. Just put a little highlight there. The part I'm really interested in, so I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to hit these edges. So the edge of the facets there. I'm going to get a little bit more paint here, and I'm just going to put little, going in the same direction, little streaks along the cuts in the facet face. I want all the paint to run in the same direction so it looks like it's reflecting off a flat surface. And you just keep spinning around like this until you've got something you're happy with. So that is our piece of Necron terrain for Pariah Nexus. Thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Labs, and we'll see you next time.